Administration Committee meeting to order. And let's start with roll.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Margaret Brown. Here. Henry Jones. Here. Matthew Saha for Fiona Ma. Here. Jason Perez. Here. Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee. Here.
Thank you. Did you say here? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on to the approval of the May 14th, 2019 Finance Administration Committee timed agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Miller.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Brown. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. And agenda item 3, our executive report, Mr. Cohen.
Thanks, Chair Taylor. Michael Cohen with CalPERS. Just one item to highlight, and that's the state budget. Last week, the governor released the May revision. Just for you and the members of the public, the May revision does continue to include the $3 billion supplemental state deposit to CalPERS, so that's very good. Just procedurally now, it's in the legislature's hands to pass a budget by June 15th. So at our next meeting, we should have a much better idea whether or not the $3 billion stays in the state budget.
Cross your fingers.
Yeah.
All right. So we are moving on to our action consent items. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Seconded by Mr. Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, and the action consent items included approval of the minutes, Treasury Management Policy, and Treasury Management Reserve Policy. Information consent items, I have not received a request to pull anything off, so we are moving on to agenda item 6A, vacancy rate assumptions. Mr. Cohen?
Yes, so this is a follow-up from our April discussion on the budget. You received the other budget items that had supplemental information requests, but this is an item we agendized. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to walk you through. It was a good exercise for us to go back and take a look at our assumptions, but we'd like to, as a recommendation, stay with our original presentation to you from April.
Okay, great. Thank you,
Good
Jennifer.
afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jennifer Harris with the Financial Office. For agenda item 6A, the vacancy rate assumption, I'm going to provide you with some background on the methodology historically utilized by CalPERS to calculate personal services expenditures, and then walk you through the new methodology that we used for the 2019-20 proposed budget. We'll discuss the fiscal impacts of calculating personal services expenditures these two ways, and then talk about the reasons why CalPERS recommends the new methodology as proposed. So for several years, CalPERS estimated personal services expenditures using estimated payroll figures included in the salaries and wages supplement. This is a document published by the Department of Finance. It starts with actual payroll data reported from the State Controller's Office, and then estimates future years' payroll, assuming 100% continuous occupancy for all positions. So it takes the positions, whatever salaries they were making in the prior year, and for those folks who aren't quite at the top step of their levels, adds 5% merit salary increases. Beginning in 2013-14, CalPERS then would reduce its personal services expenditures for savings resulting from anticipated vacancies, and this is commonly referred to as salary savings. The way that we would do this is we would look at each division specifically. We would analyze each division's current and historical vacancy rates. We would make assumptions about future hiring decisions, and then we would reduce each division's budget accordingly. Over the last 6 years, this effort resulted in salary savings reductions ranging from 4.2% to 6.9%, as displayed in the table on page 2 of your agenda. In the past, other state departments also reduced their personal services expenditures for salary savings. However, the state abandoned this practice in fiscal year 2012-13. In 2019-20, CalPERS revised its methodology to align with current state budgeting practices and to implement a more streamlined, consistent budgeting approach. This included using the mid-step salaries as published by the California Department of Human Resources, or CalHR. This lowered expenditures and reflects that not all positions will be filled at all times, and that some employees will be paid at the bottom step of a salary range, while some will be paid at a higher step. This is consistent with how other state departments budget their salaries for positions. Using the mid-step does result in lower expenditures, and it also reduced workload in the budget shop because we were no longer having to analyze specific division vacancy rates and then making assumptions and reducing their budgets. CalPERS did not in 2019-20 then reduce personal services expenditures for more salary savings. Again, the mid-step already reflects lower expenditures, and again, the state abandoned this practice several years ago. At the direction of the Finance Committee last April, we did recalculate expenditures using the historic methodology, which was those higher payroll figures as published in the Salaries and Wages Supplement. The older methodology increased salaries and wages expenditures $19.7 million, or 4.7%. Because this 4.7% is within that range of those historical salary savings targets that we had seen over the past 6 years, we feel that it is a reasonable proxy for what salary savings may have been had we performed those division-by-division specific analyses. The table on page 3 of your agenda restates our personal services expenditures with the higher salaries and then the reduction for salary savings. As you can see, there's no fiscal impact using this approach. Again, though, we do note that it did result in some efficiencies in the budget office, and this efficiency, along with some other newly implemented approaches, enabled the budget office to reduce its position count by 2 PYs, which were redirected to the position pool and will be available for redirection in the organization if other critical needs arise. Under either methodology, we want you to know that funds remain in the PERF until actual expenditures are incurred. So if at the end of the fiscal year there are still some savings because there were additional vacancies, those funds remained available for investment. And we do review all expenditures on a quarterly basis and monitor the transfer of funds from affiliates to the PERF for those reimbursements. CalPERS does recommend that you approve the 2019-20 proposed budget as presented in April. This utilized that new methodology. This captured salary savings, but in a different way, with the added benefit of resulting in some streamlining efficiencies, as well as consistency with the state budgeting practices. This approach, as we mentioned, reduced in a 2 PY position reduction in the budget office, and it also avoids concerns that divisions have when we reduce their budgets while they're endeavoring to fill their positions and at the same time meet their salary savings targets. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Sure, and I do have one question. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank you for the report. It's very clear and explains the methodology that you're using. And my ultimate goal was to assure that the savings were recognized. And so the process that you use seemed to be more efficient, so that's fine. My goal was to make sure that monies that would be coming out of the PERF and ended up not in the PERF at the end of the year would reduce our ability to invest those funds during the course of the year. And just looking at your chart here through from 2013 to 2018, that was $144 million saved due to salary savings. And if you had not done the salary savings in some kind of method, that's $144 million that would not have been invested in returns for the investment staff. So again, I appreciate you providing this report, and accomplishes the goal and is more efficient. So I'll move recommendations.
Second. Moved by Mr. Jones, seconded by Ms. Brown. I have one more. Ms. Packman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. I appreciate the background and the history of the analysis. I just had a question. I was curious why CalPERS had continued to use the old methodology long after the other state departments had moved to a different alternative.
I think neither of us were here, but my instinct just is that CalPERS has tended to kind of do its own thing given its constitutional autonomy. And so one of the things you'll see both of us continue to bring you, I think, in the next couple of years is some additional changes that sort of bring the state more into line with state practices.
Okay, thank you.
Great, and I want to thank you both for this report. So we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we will move on to 6B, the annual budget proposal, second reading.
Thank you, and that vote makes this item very easy. The document is exactly the same as what you saw in April. One of the reasons that we do the first and the second reading is to give interested parties the opportunity to provide us comments and provide you any feedback. As far as at a staff level, we haven't received any substantive comments on the budget, so would recommend approval consistent with your April vote.
And then the only thing you had to add was if we get the $3 billion, it might change the budget. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it would change the budget. It would change the state's sort of actuarial projections going forward. But
So you're fine otherwise?
yeah,
okay.
we'd be fine.
And it's been moved by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Miller. So we've moved the recommendation to approve the second reading. All those in favor? Say. Okay. All those opposed? Okay. It passes unanimously. So there we go. That was easy. We didn't. And let me move on to item 7A, which it doesn't sound like we had any.
You nailed it. Thank you very much.
You want to give him some direction? Go ahead, Margaret. I'm just kidding. So we don't have any summary of committee direction, and I do not have any public comment on. If anybody wants to make public comment, you can come up. If not, this committee has been adjourned. Thank you.